So today we are going to be talking about the 2021 Google algorithm updates as a review, right? Going over what happened in the course of 2021. We had a lot of updates, but just as a brief reminder about Google algorithm updates in general, right? There have been updates ever since like 1994, that Google has been updating the algorithm and making sure that it's trying to improve how it ranks websites and how it makes sure that it's providing quality content on the web. And they typically, we see a lot of times these major updates, which end up having names. They get names like Panda, Penguin, sometimes BERT, BERT. But sometimes there are other updates that don't get names. There are like 500 to 600 updates that happen that we don't even necessarily know about. So Google is constantly changing the algorithm. With that, just to kind of like get a glance at all the different updates that happened in 2021, we had updates to how Google indexes content. We had 3 core updates that happened, which affects the algorithm very broadly, but nothing specific. We had updates to how things show up in Google. So, we're going to dive into how how kind of like these buckets of updates, what they were, what they might affect, and what to keep in mind going forward when we're updating our websites and optimizing for Google. So I'm going to start off by passing it off to Katie Dansereau to talk about passage indexing. So here you go, Katie.
Hi, everyone. So for those who don't know me, I'm Katie, and I'm a specialist on the SEO team. So just talking about passage indexing, what had happened in February was actually an update where instead of just looking at how individual page as a whole is kind of set up, Google ended up looking at different passages within that page or different sections and using those sections to then influence the rankings as well. So what this means is that pages that may be related to a query or may have a specific passage relating to that query can now rank for it, when otherwise it would be more based on the whole topic of a page instead of just like those individual sections. So this is really valuable for long form content or maybe a blog post that includes many different subjects within it, just because now those multiple subheadings have that opportunity to have a ranking within the search engine. So this is definitely more focused on the user experience because Google is really trying to make that shift so that users have more targeted queries that would best answer their questions showing up in the search engine. So Google basically was just looking to find any opportunities that answer those niche search queries and giving those sections the opportunity to have those rankings. So this has a very small impact as a whole on rankings. It's only about 7%, but for those types of content where it's very long form or may have multiple sections, it can be extremely important as well. So something I want to note is that this is more of an internal ranking change. So this is more of something Google is taking upon themselves to consider when they're making the rankings. But it is important to make sure that there are a few things that we're doing going forward. So we want to make sure that our content that we are promoting or putting out there both caters to broad and specific questions. So although having an overview type of content and broad broad topics, having those specific questions as well can be really important to make sure that those specific passages are ranking for different queries. Also, we want to make sure that there are separate headers for every section so that Google can really understand those different subtopics within a post. And ultimately, what we want to promote going forward and what we have been doing is investing time into these long form posts that might cover a bunch of different queries, as well as long tail keyword research. So that way we're not just ranking for very broad queries, but also for more specific niche queries that may deliver into more clicks and impressions. So I'm going to pass it off to Sam, who's going to be covering the featured snippet update.
Hey, so I'm Sam Bray. I'm a content and SEO specialist. And something I'd just like to talk about briefly is it's kind of a mystery. In 2021, in February, there was a decrease in featured snippets by 40%. So the little pop-up that has a quick paragraph answering your question when you type in a search query on Google, there was a huge decrease in which and when they showed up in certain search queries. So search queries that were like one word had a huge decrease in featured snippets that were popping up when people were searching them. And there wasn't a lot of information from Google as to why this was happening. The biggest drops that we were seeing were in the financial and medical industry, which we call the health and finance, or your money, your life section of content on Google. And while we never got an answer from Google as to why this was happening, we did see an increase and everything went back to normal by March. And we didn't have any explanation from Google, and we still don't have one. So it's good that they returned. Unfortunately, we don't know why that happened, so it's difficult to prepare for possible incidents in the future. However, it's very important that we're up to date with the Google's EAT guidelines, which is just making sure that our websites are recognized as trustworthy and authentic to Google, and so that people are seeing our website pretty regularly when we're on the search page. And then we're also optimizing for content when it comes to the health and finance guidelines that Google has set out. There really are very important guidelines that we should be following for the health and finance content, because it's so important and it's very crucial information that a lot of people really need when they're searching for it. So making sure that the content is optimized so that people can find it when they need it is crucial. And it's important to understand that while featured snippets may fluctuate over time, we have to keep optimizing that content to make sure that it's always meeting the requirements that Google sets.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Petrie. I'm an SEO specialist at Rebel, and today I'm going to be talking about product reviews. So you can see right here that there were 2 product reviews in 2021. One was in April, and one was in December, and these updates were primarily seen in products or e-commerce, but it also had some effect on the service industry in certain instances. These algorithm updates share very similar qualities, and that Google wants well-researched and detailed reviews. If there was certain specs, very specific and granular things, people would get a more positive with this update. Reviews that would lead customers to a purchasing decision. So Google did not want to see any templated reviews or anything that's low content. So both of these algorithms are not based on like a penalty system, but more based on a reward system. So to the right, the December update was more impactful. So this update displayed more fluctuations and volatility and ranking, so a little bit more shifting and ranking. If you've applied the review recommendations from April update, then your products would see a positive reflection in your ranking. So the December product review also stated below some of the takeaways. It's like if you add links or other pertinent resources that were helpful for the user, anything that was around multimedia around your product review. And then lastly, if you wanted to include multiple sellers, and that would give your potential customers more purchasing options. Next slide. So this one is proximity update. This was a December update, and it was, this was also seen in general that if you're looking for local search results, determining factors were relevance, distance, and proximity. Those are the main factors that determine local results. So this update affected local searches and map pack results. This was stated by the SEO experts that this update had a very dramatical difference in ranking in the beginning of December. It had a more significant impact and positive impact for smaller, less established businesses that are that were closer to the users when they were searching. And now, so it would help them rank better than the more like overpowering and really established businesses that were out there and that were further away. So Google said that it was primarily, this update was to kind of rebalance and these factors that make up the algorithm, that there was more an observation on proximity, so that would get a bigger boost versus like relevant factors would see a little more decline. So just to review, like a local pack is like a SERP feature that appears on the first page of results for a search query with local intent. So it features a map of the business locations along with the listings and 3 other businesses that are relevant to your actual search. So again, like, why should we care about this? The local pack has like a great influence on certain businesses and industries than others. It's really valuable for businesses that are looking to strengthen its visibility and the engagement with local audiences. The local pack also, it's easier for them to find businesses like websites and hours, addresses, and phone numbers. This was also really important for them. And so if you were targeting a click-to-call referral through Google, the local pack is crucial. It's a crucial referral channel that needs to be targeted. So this was good for restaurants, heating, local establishments, anything that's a brick and mortar. So again, like the winners for this particular update are the businesses that didn't really put a lot of their keywords in their business names, and other strong competitors did. And also people that maybe had secondary locations along with their prominent location. Some of the people that were affected by this, or what we call the losers, were the ones that were kind of ranked further away from their office, and businesses with keywords in their business name. And I'll give you an example of that. So it was catered more towards newer businesses that had a better shot in ranking for this update. So if we go under like, well, what does Google suggest that we do about this? Again, Google My Business deliverable kind of covered this as well, but you want to make sure you have the up-to-date business information. You want to make sure that the first page, anything to be display on the first page of Google under your profile is complete and accurate. You want to make sure that it has your hours and your events that are associated with your businesses, making sure you're responding to reviews, including updated photos, and just really telling the story of your business, making sure that you're connecting with your potential customers. And here's the example. So this example, as you can see over and to the left-hand side, is that it concentrated more on keyword-rich businesses, a keyword density, and then when you go into the after effect, you're going to see it is more towards based on proximity of the user's location. So it will display a completely different map pack for you. And I would like to pass this off to Nolan, and he will talk about page experience and the spam updates.
Alrighty, what's up, everybody? I'm Nolan. I'm a SEO specialist. And I'm going to talk to you guys about the page experience update that rolled out in June, and just kind of impact of it, the importance of it, what it focused on, et cetera, et cetera. So the page experience update was something that was being talked about a long time in the SEO industry. You know, there's a lot of actual preparation that was able to go into this update. A lot of times Google will have updates and they won't give you a heads up about it. So you really have no way to prepare for it, like the broad updates or, you know, like a spam update. But this was an interesting update because everyone in the SEO industry knew it was coming, so you could actually prepare for it and kind of get ready for it. And essentially, this update focuses on you know, your page experience, how people are actually interacting with your website. And then Google actually kind of came up with their own set of metrics to be able to classify what they deem as a user-friendly website. Those 3 metrics are the ones that you're seeing here, which are largest contentful paint, which essentially, you know, how fast your website loads, cumulative layout shift, which is, is your website visually stable or things not shifting around. And then first input delay, which is, can a user, when they get to your website, click something and, how long does it take them to do that? So really a big update, and interesting and just big update, because it's kind of the first time Google's actually incorporated user experience into like an actual ranking factor. So this is, the first time that they're actually, putting it on web developers to actually make their website user-friendly from a technical perspective. So to be able to kind of quantify that, or we have a way to do that now with Google with these 3 metrics. And then just the key takeaways and things that I think is interesting about this update is that for all the preparation and like the time that goes into Core Web Vitals, because this is like, you need a developer to work with a developer on a lot of this stuff. You need to, be able to implement a lot of changes that are not easy to do. For all the things that you can kind of do to improve your Core Web Vitals, it is still even said by Google to be a lightweight ranking factor. So it's not going to really make or break you in the rankings when you're among your competitors. If your competitors have better content than you, or if their website actually has better information than you, they're going to still outrank you, even if you have better Core Web Vitals than them, or or just if you have a better website from that perspective. So that's just kind of interesting to note. And the way to kind of describe this is that if you and your website, like you're both attorney clients, you have very similar content, you do the exact same thing, like maybe you're both personal injury attorneys, this could be that tiebreaker, factor that does give you that boost. So obviously it's still important, but it's not something that just because you're all of a sudden passing Core Web Vitals, you're going to have this huge, increase in your ranking going forward. And then obviously just important because anytime you make a website, you want to have good user experience, and Google is really focusing on that. They're really emphasizing the importance of having, page experience, and they're kind of just putting it on developers and SEOs now to consider whenever they make a website or they're working on a website that's not only, has good content, it's not only very, it's good from a usability perspective or an accessibility perspective, but it also actually loads properly and things are not moving, and just it's actually performing from like a technical perspective too. So that's just really interesting. And then just as SEOs going forward, this is something that collaboration is just going to be critical going forward. Whenever we have new clients or existing clients, there's going to be a lot of collaboration that needs to take place between SEOs and developers now. Which luckily at Rub we have an awesome development team, and Sheldon knows a ton about Core Web Vitals and analyzing a website for things that can improve, and it's just going forward even more critical to be able to have that communication and that technical knowledge from a development side that maybe in the past an SEO would not think they need to know, like how to analyze script or analyze JavaScript or analyze resources or look at the server, all these kind of technical things. It's really going to fall on SEOs now to broaden their technical knowledge and have some development knowledge as well, so we can actually analyze a website from that technical perspective. So yeah, hope that was a good little summary. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you guys about the spam and the link spam updates. So there's a bunch of spam updates this year from Google. There's one in June, July, and then one that actually just happened in November. And a lot of times Google doesn't give you a ton of information about these spam updates just because they don't really want people who do these kind of black hat or spammy tactics to know what they're doing or what they're focusing on. But it's kind of giving up, like just there was some rumblings about what they were. So the June update was essentially implement a new method detecting low quality link building. The July update was actually a pretty specific one. So that actually focused on paid links, affiliate links, and sponsored guest posting. So this was basically, a lot of websites, they do affiliate marketing. So if you, do product reviews on your website and you list out to the product, like as an affiliate link, you have to make sure you're using the rel equals sponsored attribute whenever you're doing that. That's just something that's really important in this update. So like if you don't do a ton of affiliate marketing, I don't think, but that was a big part of the spam update. And also interesting, in the July spam update, they basically just said that they released a new, like a better way of them to identify spammy links or people using spammy tactics. So that's like a really broad and general statement, but essentially, they release something or something in their algorithm, their backend, that they can now identify people who are doing this. And if you're doing that, you know, they're gonna, you know, take action against you, get a manual action, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But very interesting update. And the November update, again, there wasn't a ton of information on this update, but there were some rumors in the SEO community that this was a content spam update, and that it may have targeted cloaking content spam. So, you know, if you go to Google and you type in, you know, golf clubs or something, you go to Google, type in golf clubs, and you click on something that looks like it's going to be golf clubs, and it takes you to something that's not golf clubs. That's cloaking content spam, and there are rumors that this is what this update's focused on. So, I mean, the big takeaway here is just don't do things that are against Google's webmaster guidelines. You know, follow all of their procedures. Make sure, you know, you're always working on improving your site's content so you can just naturally track links over time. You don't have to do, you know, any weird spammy tactic, which, you know, most SEOs aren't, but there is, you know, a lot of people who do some of the spammy stuff. So good to see Google, you know, taking action against them, and, you know, rewarding the people that are doing things properly, and just kind of focus on giving people a good, you know, web experience. And then also, there's one more thing I wanted to say about that, I think. Oh, and then just also, I always think, whenever, for the new business team, whenever we inherit a new client, just for your knowledge, I think it's, as SEOs, we always need to take a look into their Google Search Console, make sure they have no manual actions, because anything that you can kind of do, it could be even on like the Google My Business side, it could be on, which some of our clients actually do some of their own, like, you know, edits on. If you do anything in spam with their Google My Business or anything spammy just in general, we want to check their Google Search Console and make sure they don't have a manual action, so we don't really get blamed for that. Because we can, you know, inherit a client and they have a manual action. If we say 2 months down the line, oh, you had a manual action, like, well, you didn't have a manual action, what did you do? But if that's something we can identify from the beginning and be like, you know, this is a big deal, we can fix this for you, it's going to take some time, but always just good to check. That's one of the first things I kind of do when I get a client, to make sure they have manual actions. So I don't know if anyone's ever had a manual action. I never have, but I think it'd be kind of interesting to deal with one. I'm not really sure on the process for that, but yeah, just make sure we're following the rules, doing all the best practices, and always read their Google Webmaster Guidelines if there's any updates, which as SEOs we should always be doing. So I think that's pretty much it.
All right, next is going to be Ryan Bremer.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, so my name is Ryan. I'm an SEO specialist here at Rebel, and I'm going to start off talking about the core or broad updates that happened in 2021. So just an overview of what core updates are, as the name would imply, like, they're broad updates, so they impact a wide variety of topics, but generally it focuses on content. The analogy that Google uses with core updates is, let's say you had a top 10 list of your favorite movies, and you recorded that in 2015. And then 5 years later, you decide to relook at that list, and new movies have come out that are maybe more impactful or relevant. Maybe in hindsight, you look at some of those movies that were on your list, and maybe your tastes have changed, or there's just something off about them that you didn't pick up on before. And so it's also important to understand that there is no geographic targeting with core or broad updates, and there's technically no website category targeting. I'll explain why that's not necessarily accurate in just a second, but starting off in June, this was our first core update of the year, and it was interesting because this was like the first, or one of the first updates where Google really released it incomplete. Generally speaking, Google does not have a staging or test environment, so they will put out updates that maybe have bugs in them, and they will work once they're released in the background, based on what's happening in real time and fixing those issues. But what's interesting about this June update is Google flat out said, like, yeah, this does not have everything we want in it, but we're going to release it anyway. So that's why we have the July update, which was just a follow-up to the June one. And surprisingly, it actually ended up reverting a lot of what happened in the June update. for some websites. It was smaller than the June one. It lasted about 12 days. The biggest fluctuations were on the 2nd and the 9th, if I remember correctly. And these updates generally impacted a lot of directory sites like Wikipedia. There was also a broad update in November, and we saw a lot of volatility with the health sector. So going back to the website categories not technically being targeted, and what core updates focus on, let's just keep in mind, going back to your money, your life, and our discussion on that is like different categories will have different thresholds for what constitutes quality content, specifically with authoritativeness, trustworthiness, expertise, things like that, right? So a website discussing medical information or finances is going to have more stringent guidelines for what determines whether or not they're expertise or not, especially compared to, let's say, like a roofing client. So this is important, just looking at the high level strategy of content, right? We're trying to keep in mind the quality, right, the structure, and the relevance. So starting off with quality, if they do fit under those categories that have more stringent guidelines, we do need to consider what language Google uses with these updates. And it has a lot to do with that EAT system, trust, authoritativeness, expertise. And so doing things like building up, an author page that has links to it from other reputable sites. Because generally speaking, if you are an expert in one of those fields, you're probably being talked about on other websites. Maybe if it's a finance article, maybe your author is mentioned, and this is a little ambitious, but maybe in the New York Times or something similar to that. But it's not as simple as just creating an author and setting up an author page, right? And you can actually Google some pretty highly competitive search terms within those industries like finance. So for example, if you were to search maybe what are the best index funds or something, likely the first result is going to have a author, as well as maybe even someone that has edited or reviewed that specific blog post with links to those reviewer, those editor, those author pages with a detailed bio of what their background is and where they've been mentioned before online. There's going to be a lot of strong internal linking on that article that goes into content structure I'll talk about in just a second. But there's also, they may even have a link to a page discussing their editorial processes, right? So keeping those in mind for those types of clients is going to be super, super important. And it's already something that we do consider. But moving on into the relevance, or I should say the structure of content, internal linking and how you bucket content into different sections of your website is super, super important. I know I'm getting into more of the tactical side of things as opposed to the high level strategy, but just want to throw this out there for the SEO team specifically. I know I used an analogy before during the town hall on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm going to continue to use that because I like it. But if you're writing a blog about how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? The content needs to be robust. It can't just be a simple kind of step-by-step, even though that's important. It needs to include, the different types of bread and crunchy versus smooth and things like that. And you have to internally link to sections of your website that talk about those specific elements of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So when you're talking about jelly, you gotta link out to your jelly page or whatever it is. So just making sure that the quality of content in terms of authoritativeness and expertise, as well as how you're structuring the content, is important. There are a ton of different impacts to how Google determines the quality of your content other than, right, fluff is better. Okay. I don't know if I agree with you on that, Scott, but that's fine. So, other than those elements, there are ranking factors in terms of the quality of your written content, right? And how it's displayed, how things outside of your written content play into a factor, how your multimedia, right? Like images and video. Even though images and video may not be a direct ranking factor, how your strategy plays in and having that relevant content that kind of enhances the written aspect can really play an impact here. And then lastly, you have the content relevance, which you have likely the least amount of control on. It's like how Google is matching your content to what people are searching. So just at a strategy level, right, it's important to consider like your target audience and making sure that you're curating content that you know that your audience is going to want to consume. You don't have full control over how Google aligns your content with what people are searching and what gets displayed within Google. But just keeping that in mind when you're developing a content strategy is super, super important. Some things I want to just quickly go over before I move into the next update. I want to direct your attention to the bottom half of this slide, going over actually one of our clients that we're going to start working on this month, but this is a organic keyword trend graph over the past 2 years for this client. And you'll notice that in January of 2020, December of 2020, and then again in June of 2021, there have been these consistent drops in the total number of keywords that this website is ranking for. And what these months all have in common is a core algorithm update, right? So, there's a lot of things that can be playing a role here, whether some changes happened internally on the site. Maybe there's an issue with the tracking tool that we're using here, just internal to that tracking tool, right? But this is a strong indicator that there's an issue with the quality of content on this website, or else it wouldn't keep getting hit by these algorithm updates. So this is just one way in which the SEO team can use this year-over-year data to curate a implementation plan for an SEO strategy. Because, let's say there was a ton of technical issues with the site as well, and we focused on that, and that may impact things. But if we keep getting hit over and over again for core updates that we know are going to keep coming, right, we're just going to keep losing visibility within Google. And lastly here, just my favorite part of this slide, I do have some quotes here just pulled from the SEO community on Twitter. So the first one you see here, and these are right after the June update. So this first individual is noticing some fluctuations going on within his search visibility. And he's noticing that domains, and specifically older domains that maybe even aren't relevant to what people are searching, are now ranking ahead of him. Going back to what we were talking about with content relevance, like you don't have full control over what Google displays, and oftentimes they don't get it right as they're rolling out these updates. So that's, it's a point of frustration for SEOs and clients where, we're doing everything right, but these fluctuations are just going to happen as Google releases incomplete updates. The second quote, definitely my favorite here, is this person saying he's feeling like a lab rat in Google's algorithm. And he's noticing that he used to get a lot of inquiries from his product pages, indicating that his product pages are ranking really well. But now he's getting more service inquiries, indicating that maybe, those service pages are now ranking well where his product pages used to. So another just point of frustration with these fluctuations. And Joe, going back to your question you had with featured snippets, it's like, okay, so we see these fluctuations. Is this a good thing, a bad thing? How do we position it to our clients? Is it an opportunity to, differentiate ourselves from our competition? And the answer is it depends. Specifically with core updates, the answer is probably no. Just because, right, like either it's released incomplete or, Google is seemingly, based on these quotes, like having an issue with content relevance and made a mistake and needs to backtrack them, right? So we're doing everything right in this hypothetical situation. And so changing our content strategy, right, at a high level doesn't make sense just because we're seeing fluctuations in a 2-week period or whatever. However, if something is newly introduced to the algorithm, going back to the page experience update and core web vitals, right? That's a new metric that we haven't considered before. So it is something new to our strategy that we need to take into consideration. But if we're looking at just at a high level, Google's goal of trying to show the most relevant and most quality content, if our goal aligns with that, which it does already, in delivering relevant content to our target market and delivering quality content, there's no need for a change in strategy necessarily. This is where the collaboration between MBD and SEO comes in, and discussing like how we want to articulate these fluctuations that we honestly don't have much control over to our clients, because it's basically you kind of have to weather out the storm in a lot of these situations. But more to come on that. Anyway, I'll digress on core updates and we can move on to page titles.
Can I just make a quick point about the core updates too? I think just for the business team, it's great to know, just like, it's interesting that like all the core updates, we have no way as SEOs to prepare for these. Like there's nothing that we can really do except, just try to do, like Ryan said, do good content, do the best practices, keep, follow the strategy that we always do. I just think when you're communicating with clients, I think just letting them know, like, because a lot of times we do get like questions about like, oh, I heard there was an algorithm update, like what are we doing about that? Like a lot of times, like you kind of just have to see if it affected you. And if it didn't, then kind of just, I think we continue with what you're doing. But if it, if it did affect you and you see a big dip, that is when you really do want to, I think, look at your content and stuff. But as SEOs, I just think going forward, I think it'd be nice if we had more transparency from Google, because right now it is just kind of like, we basically just kind of have to react to like these updates, and there's not much we can really do. That's why the page experience update is interesting, because we had so much time to like prepare for this huge like page experience update, like all the SEOs, everyone was preparing and optimizing websites for these things. And then Google was like, oh, it just has a tiny ranking factor though. So like we did all this preparation and work for it, and then it didn't seem like it had that much of an impact. And the ones that do have a huge impact, like these core updates, we have really no way to prepare for them or get any information on them. So it's kind of tough in that sense. But yeah, I think Ryan made the great points. Just all you can do is just keep making great content and then just stay on top of these. But it is going to be, I think, kind of reactionary in nature, because they don't tell you what they actually did with these updates. So you kind of just have to see if it affected you and go from there. So I think just being honest with the clients in that sense is, really important. So we don't have much we can do sometimes. Google doesn't tell us.
For sure. That's a great point, Nolan. And speaking of frustration with Google algorithm transparency, we're moving on now into the title tag update, which we, as SEOs, like we really did not get any notice on. Before I go into that, I'm just going to share a blog article that Google circulates every time they release a core algorithm update, just going over best practices. But it's everything we've covered so far. It's making quality, original, robust content from, and trying to boost the authoritativeness that you as a resource have within Google's eyes. But with this title tag update that happened, I believe in September, if not late August. So basically the way that this works is when you create a web page, you are given, or you create a page title, which is essentially like a headline for the content on that page. And Google will take this HTML tag that you have, which is the title of your page, and use it as a headline within Google search results, which is that blue hypertext that you see when you're making searches within Google. And so as SEOs, we know that there are some best practices that go into creating these title tags. They have to be within a certain range of Characters, generally you want them to have the primary keyword within them. Maybe throw in the business name. Also, just making sure that it encompasses the topic that you're discussing and making sure that it's super relevant to, again, the content. So as the SEOs, this is one of the first things that we do is we go in and see how optimized the titles are, and if we need to go in and rewrite them. And the issue comes in where you don't have an SEO to look at this, and maybe a webmaster that's not familiar with best practices, writes these title tags, or they just stick with whatever is generated from their CMS. And this is an issue for Google, just because Google wants to display relevant headlines that indicate to the user that they're displaying relevant content, right? So if it's just a bunch of random things, or it's just the name of the business, like it's not going to be helpful to a user. So what Google will do is they will basically rewrite your page title. It won't literally rewrite, the HTML code of your website. So it doesn't impact the ranking factor that title tags have, but it will change the title that is displayed within Google. And this is actually great if those titles aren't optimized. The issue is Google changed the frequency in which this happened and how they went about determining, I guess, when to change the title tag and where they're pulling, information to generate a new one. So in the example here, we have this optimized title tag. It's within the 60 character limit or whatever threshold. It has the main keyword at the beginning of the title. It's relevant, it's structured properly, all that fun stuff. And unfortunately, Google, instead of just using this already optimized and relevant title tag, went onto the website, went onto that page, went into the banner image of this page and looked at the alt text of this banner image and pulled that as a headline. And so you can see at the bottom where this newly generated headline is. It's clunky. It mixes capitalization, lowercase. It doesn't have the primary keyword really, and it's just not optimized. And it's one for SEO and two for just consumer, people to consume in terms of information. It just doesn't make sense. So this is another one of those kind of half-baked updates that Google releases live, in lieu of a testing environment, and just looks in real time what's happening and makes changes accordingly in the back end. So this update was met with a lot of backlash from the SEO community, including Rebel. We had a lot of internal discussion as to what this means for our clients and ranking factors, and if it changes our strategy. And so Google listened to this feedback from the SEO community and kind of retracted what they had stated before. It wasn't John Mueller, but it was someone else that's a search advocate at Google that was, originally not in favor of giving people control over whether or not they Google displays their title tag or a newly generated one. But then he kind of said, well, maybe if we created a HTML tag that specifies that we want to keep the tag and limit it to 5, whatever. He just started kind of backtracking his original thoughts on this. And then Google, after getting this backlash from the community, stated we will make a lot of changes on the back end, continue to work off your feedback, and we will make sure that we use the HTML title tags more than 80% of the time, and we'll focus on the most relevant information other than the title to generate new ones like the H1 tag and things like that. So it just goes to show though we don't have control over the tactical implementations of a algorithm update, Google still listens to what we have to say and makes changes accordingly. So with that being said, I'm going to hand things back over to Nate just to kind of wrap this up, and then we can get into questions.
Thanks, Ryan. This is Nate Smansky, SEO manager. Forgot to say that at the top. But some key takeaways here from all these different updates. When we talk about core updates, right? There's a lot of different factors that could play into it, but we want to focus on making sure that we have quality content that your website is relevant to what you're trying to provide, and relevant to what the searcher is trying to look for. Making sure that you have plenty of information that helps the user achieve either the service or answer the question that they're looking for. We talked about product pages with that product review update and giving more information about these products, where these products changed or updated, and having unique information around them as well. For these Google business profiles, formerly known as Google My Business, you can no longer just keyword stuff your way into local pack results, right? The local pack is now zeroing in on a much smaller vicinity than they previously were. Instead of looking at a larger area to show you some businesses, they're looking at more local businesses that are popping up around you in your actual neighborhood, maybe. For a lot of these updates, a lot of times they don't happen immediately either. A lot of these updates will be, you may have heard the term roll out. So they've been rolled out over the course of either days, weeks, or even months at times. And so it's important to know that when an update happens, we do have to be patient. We don't want to be too reactionary. We kind of want to be observant, watch what happens, and then go, figure out a strategy from there to plan what to do next if you were impacted negatively. And keyword rankings are normally fluctuate anyway. So if you see your keywords fluctuate, that's going to happen in Google search results, no matter what. But it is important for us to kind of keep in mind, how volatile these fluctuations are, and that can be an indication that a major update did happen. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up here. Thank you for kind of watching and listening in on as we kind of reviewed these Google algorithm updates for 2021. And I hope there's a lot that you took away from this and were able to learn from our presentation. So thank you very much.